Greg. Thanks for coming
Yeah,
on.
thanks. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. To get started, people may know you, but if they don't, maybe you could just give yourself a quick little intro.
Sure. My name is Greg Mushin. Live here in Seattle. That's where we are recording this right now.
Yeah.
Um, have a background in technology, but also have had kind of a lifelong interest in health. Kind of starting at a young age with my dad, who is a doctor, and probably like an really early biohacker. So I have this, childhood memory of him doing all of these, experiments, like testing his urine pH and things like that. So yeah, I've kind of had this like lifelong fascination with health that really, I would say, like changed probably about 8 years ago when I had my daughter, and it really kind of hit me. I was having her when I was 40, and I think at that moment in time, health became something a little bit more serious because I wanted to, live a long time. And I think things changed again for me about 2 years ago. Kind of two things happened. I got really sick with a mold illness, and around the same time, I went to this wedding, and the bride was, probably in her late 30s, early 40s, and her dad wasn't there to walk her down the aisle. And I remember thinking to myself at that moment, I'm not letting that happen. And so I think that's kind of when I took, put things into turbo boost mode.
Yeah. That's interesting because I was actually gonna ask you that later on, but you
Oh,
kind
you
of
were?
already answered it.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
No, that's good. Good to know. So obviously you had a super impressive transformation, which we'll put on screen for people to see. Um, but how long ago was that now?
Let's see, I started almost 2 years ago,
Okay.
but for like the visual transformation, it kind of started in July of 2023,
Mm-hmm. So it was like about a year and a half, right?
about a year and a half, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So super transformation for any point in life, but obviously at that point, the more people age, the less likely they get to have such a crazy transformation. So that's probably part of the heavy hitting factor. So if anyone knows you from that, that'll be very interesting to see. But yeah, I guess you kind of said like how you got into health and stuff, but maybe you could talk about your background a little bit in tech and those
Yeah,
kind
my
of things.
background's, it's been all in tech. So I spent, let's see, I got to do some math here, like 27 years, I want to say, in tech, doing a lot of different roles, kind of starting in actually in marketing and then moving over to engineering pretty quickly.
Uh,
And so engineering and then into product.
and I guess how did you kind of transition from being all into tech to from I mean obviously you said a bit what was your motivation, but what was that transition like from tech to kind of becoming a biohacker?
Oh gosh, well, I would say it probably started when my daughter was born. Um, but I I was super lucky. I was so lucky to meet this doctor. His name's Sam Madeira, and it was actually he had an office in this building where we're
Uh,
recording, and I was just so lucky to meet him. And he was really early on to a lot of testing at the time, like fractionated lipids and all sorts of things. And so I think that was really a catalyst to being able to like look at biomarkers, understand them a lot better. And I remember really like cleaning up my diet, doing tons of testing on that. So that was probably about, yeah, 8 years ago.
so you started working with him?
Yeah, I started working with him, and he just such a great practitioner. He has such an interesting background because he's a naturopath by training. He trained here in Bastyr in Seattle, but also has so much training in like herbology as well.
Yeah.
At the same time, he like a lot of his views are, you know, straight from mainstream medicine as well.
Mm,
So everything that he does, to this extent that it can be, is science based.
yeah.
With some other things where we don't really know, where he was willing to experiment,
Yeah.
and then also had like a really good background in male hormones. So he worked at like a male hormone clinic for, I want to say like 7 or 8 years. So knew that stuff backwards and forwards too. So I was just really lucky to meet him because he was so well rounded.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, usually it's the most well-rounded practitioners. Even in like a holistic practitioner, there's another level of being holistic,
Yeah,
and that well-roundedness makes it kind of like everything under one roof. Because even with holistic practitioners, everyone has their specialty, and then you'll end up working with one person for one thing, someone else.
definitely.
We can have that kind of go-to person, or at least you can consult with them about everything that you might be interested in, you're working on. It's kind of optimal in that sense.
Yeah, and he could go really deep on like nutrition. He could go deep in that area. He was like really early into like understanding how genetics played into nutrition and diet. So I think that one of the things that he he really kind of opened my eyes to how powerful that could be, because I think like 8 years ago I found out that it was ApoE, and so we did like a whole bunch of experimentation on diet and different interventions, and we're able to get my lipids to like this really great place. But I think that one ApoE, just knowing that one gene, made me think so differently about all of these other genes that may be impacting me.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky to meet him.
So that was kind of like the impetus for starting to change things.
Yeah, because I would see these results and I would feel so much better. And then it was like he always had something new for me. So he's kind of like leading me on this journey. And I think that, once I got to a certain place and I started understanding why things were working, then it was like this new world kind of opened up to me.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
Yeah,
You start to see how much there is and like how much there is to learn about.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he would, I remember one time too, because he's just so thoughtful about why you might be experiencing certain things. And I remember one time I had this, like I had almost no motivation. And so I was talking to him about that. And I remember him just like thinking deeply about it. Like he didn't just give me an
Blurt
answer
something out.
or blurt something out. I could just see him processing. And he was like, "Are you taking a lot of zinc by chance? Like how much zinc are you taking?" I was like, "I think I've been taking like 30 milligrams." He's like, "Let's test your copper." And sure enough, we tested my copper, and copper was low, and it had been depleted from this zinc. And so once we restored that, obviously, critical and brain function, but that resolved everything. And so that kind of like sent me down this rabbit hole of like, what other nutrients am I missing? And if copper can have that big of an impact, like there's got to be like so many other micronutrients that could have a similar or greater impact, and I'm probably not getting them.
Yeah.
So I think it was just kind of like the series of insights where I'd bring him a problem, he'd find the solution to it somehow, and it would just like open up this new way of thinking.
Yeah. That's interesting because I always tell people, when you're casually like in conversation with someone consulting, like you can only give so much advice without getting to a certain level of detail, knowing their labs, like
Yeah.
what symptoms do they have, what's their health history, all these things. So like I'll always try to tell someone like I can give you, general supplement advice, diet advice, lifestyle advice, all these things which are great. But usually when it comes so quick, people don't take it with so much value. But then also like I'm like, there's so much complex stuff out there to navigate. Like even practitioners get confused with all the information coming at them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, the simplest advice I could give you, like the highest ROI thing you could do is find a good practitioner that you like and trust and work with them. Because they're like
Definitely.
your outlet, like you said. It's like opening the door to the whole like warehouse. They're your
Yeah.
outlet to everything else.
Yeah, literally standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, because like I'll talk to a lot of people who they're like, their efforts in the right place. They're trying to do the right things. They're investing. Oh, I'm taking this supplement. I'm doing this. I'm making this diet modification. But without the knowledge and the constant research, even with practitioners, right? Like you need to stay up to date as things are constantly changing. And if someone's not passionate, they're gonna end up falling behind the curve, right?
Yeah, things change so fast.
So it's like someone's efforts in the right place, but they're just off the mark, and then they can end up doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Sounds like he was a good practitioner. You got lucky to get with
I
him
got
from the
so
start.
lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you started working with him, was it anything specific that you were addressing, or was it just like, I want to take my health seriously, I want to feel better?
I remember going to him and it's like, hey, I want to come see you because I'm just about to have a daughter and I want to make sure that I'm around for her for a long time. And he's like, okay, I got you.
That's
So
awesome.
I remember, going into his office, and he spent like 2 or 3 hours with me.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
we
a
were
good
just talking
sign.
about everything. We went through like every aspect of my life. Like, walk me through your diet. What do you do? Like the first thing that you wake up, like what do you do? What do you eat? Like, when do you drink water? How much water do you drink? Do you even know? Like, what is the consistency of your poop? I mean, he just like went through it all.
Yeah.
And so we just spent like it was like 2 or 3 hours. That was just like doing patient intake. And I couldn't believe how thorough he was.
That's always a good sign.
Yeah, it was great. That's probably another thing. I mean, if you can find a practitioner who can spend a good, it doesn't have to be 2 or 3 hours, but a good amount of time so they can get all that context.
Yeah.
That's just gonna be so helpful.
Yeah, I always tell people a good sign is that when you're getting in, like taking in, doing the intake, onboarding stuff, it should be like a bit uncomfortable and you should have some resistance.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it's probably not thorough enough, right?
Exactly.
Because like you don't want to have to fill out that 5-page form or do
No.
all these assessments, but that's again why you have to be motivated as a patient or client, because it's like that stuff is not fun. You're not gonna want to do it. It's gonna be like, oh, I don't remember what I did, 10 years ago or what happened in that incident. You know what I mean? But it's like that's a level of detail for someone to actually be able to properly, holistically treat you and work with
Definitely.
you.
I remember him actually going through each one of my family members too.
Exactly.
So I talked about like my mom. He was asking like, did she have any health issues? What about your dad? What about your maternal? Are your grandparents still alive?
What's the difference between the maternal side and the paternal side?
Yeah. My paternal grandfather died early, so he like asked all about that. And I remember him just being so detailed. And after that, he was like, I think here's some things that I think that we need to test. And so I just kind of came up with a kind of a testing plan and just started from there. And I remember I took this Boston Heart health test, which is, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but, fractionated lipids and things like that. And when it comes back, it's like, green, yellow, and red. And I could not believe how much stuff on that report was red. And it was like a huge eye opener to me. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, I think this man saved my life. Because I wouldn't have known to take this test. I wouldn't have known that I had all of these issues. And we're making a plan to address them. But if I hadn't seen him, I would have gone down a completely different path. And, may have met the fate of my paternal grandfather who died in his 50s. So I remember really early on just being so thankful that I found him. And then we started these interventions. So many of them were like dietary. And so I like implemented those. And I remember retaking this Boston Heart Health test. And like I think the second one, I had like mostly greens and yellows. And by the third, I was like all green.
Wow. And
I just could not believe that we like turned everything around. And I'd never felt better in my life. I just felt like $1 million. And I made all these lifestyle changes and had just incredible amounts of energy. It was feeling amazing. But then, being in tech, I took on some new responsibilities. And I remember starting at this Series C startup as an exec there. And at that stage of a company, it's just like, there's just so much stress and it's just so brutal. And I remember after 2 years, I retook my labs and things were just not good. I think my high sensitivity C reactive protein was just like off the charts.
Wow.
I was so inflamed. And so could not believe how much things could change in 2 years. And so, went on another protocol, like got everything back in about a month and took some time off from there and kind of got back into shape. So, yeah, it is kind of funny. I feel like it's kind of like balancing a plate a lot of times. You can't always keep things perfect. It's a big moving target. Your life changes, you change, circumstances in your life change, and you really kind of have to be adaptive.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing I've kind of realized is you just really need to test probably a lot more than you think you need to on certain markers, not on like everything. And then really try to find interventions in your lifestyle that you enjoy and that are going to fit your lifestyle and be sustainable. That's been a huge learning for me for everything. Like in diet, if you don't like your diet, it's not going to stick. It doesn't matter like how disciplined you think you are. You're not going to stay with it, or you're just going to hate life.
Yeah. If you're fighting the uphill battle, like pushing the ball, actually it's going to roll down unless you can find a way to make it doable for you.
Exactly. And there's always a way to find it, to make things doable. But I think that's probably some of the wisdom that I've kind of learned after years of doing this is just how important sustainability is.
Good.
And I think that if you can kind of, oftentimes it can be difficult to get there because there can be so much dogma attached to a lot of different things, whether that be interventions, whether that be different diet tribes. I feel like diet tribes can be particularly dogmatic.
Yeah.
People get into their camp and that they just want to hang on for dear life. But I think if you can kind of get past that a little bit and approach things from first principles, where if you're talking about diet, what do I really need to do? What are going to be my macro ratios? What are the micros that I need? And then work backwards from there. What are the foods that I like, that I really enjoy eating, that are going to give me those macros and micros that I look forward to? And I think once you can do something like that, then it becomes easy because you just like it.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. We were actually just talking about, before we started recording, about the gut microbiome and how sensitive and how sensitive the balance can be of the gut lining being a single cell wall. And just like, you can do a gut protocol and things can be restored and in good order, and then you can go and have a poor lifestyle, various environmental factors, and just...
It doesn't take much, does it?
Mess it up again, which I think is one of the problems with people who are not committed. So someone can have a crazy, bad lifestyle, bad environment, come to a practitioner, do the work with them, but they're not really internalizing it. They're just like, oh, the doctor's telling me to do this, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
They follow the orders of just what they're told to do, and then once that protocol is finished, they just go back to their old ways, and they're like, oh, I'm fixed now, I can just live normally, and they go back to bad habits and then lose all the progress.
Yeah, exactly.
But then they don't have the tools to pick it up again, so then it can become just that kind of negative feedback loop.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's amazing. I think that if you don't know why you're doing certain things in the protocols, it can be easy to forget. If you don't know why you're taking a certain supplement or drug, you just kind of forget and you stop taking it and you don't realize oh yeah, I actually, I really need that.
The motivation behind it is huge too, right? Like
Yeah.
you had a really strong why, so you knew why you wanted to do it. And I was gonna say like you were probably in like 0.001% of like patients or clients or anybody in terms of someone who's coming to seek professional help in a optimization and prevention measure with
Yeah,
that
definitely.
motivation, because I've talked to various practitioners too, and it's like it's rare that someone will come forward to just feel better, get in better health when they don't have something that's critically affecting their day to day and they're not in past a certain threshold of pain.
Yeah, yeah. Sam has actually told me that. He's like, you are kind of like in the top 0.1% of my patient base in terms of really want to push the needle. But I feel like it's kind of sad in a way. It makes me a little
Yeah.
bit sad because I think that people don't realize how much better life could be if they just worked with a good practitioner and looked at the things that they needed to address and then actually developed a lifestyle
Yeah.
to address those things. I think people just don't realize like how good they can feel.
Yeah.
That you can sleep and be out like a light for 8.5 hours, even in older age, and wake up feeling completely refreshed and like ready to start the day. So I think if people knew that, I think that if they knew that no, really, if you fix your gut or if you really dial in your diet and dial in your exercise and address certain things that are going on in your body, you could just feel amazing. Instead of driving around in a 1972 Honda Accord or,
Yeah.
like a Pinto or whatever, you're now in like a Porsche. Like, wow, this is a lot better.
I totally agree. It's crazy because this is kind of a philosophy that I have and I've thought of, but I've never heard it like communicated. But you see a lot of like natural, alternative, functional practitioners be on one side where it's like, nutraceuticals, herbs,
Yeah,
natural
yeah,
stuff. And then you have this kind of new wave, more modern stuff of like peptides, various compounds, biohacking, and some of the practitioners are against it and some of them are for. Some people are too much on this side, like gung ho, like yeah, take everything. Some people are
yeah.
like, oh no, nothing new, only natural. And there's
Hmm.
a sweet spot. So I think there's such a huge gap in terms of like human potential between people who are balanced between both, because in my opinion, like 99.999% of people never even in our modern age never even reach their natural potential in terms
Right,
of like just get rid of the dysfunctions, just
exactly.
optimize your body's natural pathways and mechanisms, right? Have the nutrients you need, have a proper functioning body. That's like if a normal person reaches that, that's like amazing.
Oh yeah,
Most people never even get close, right? Like 25, 50%, 100%. If you think of like 80/20, most people don't even get close to their 80, let alone their 100, right?
yeah,
And that's only one piece of the puzzle. Then you have this kind of other part, which is more modern solutions, biohacking, which some people are against. Like, oh, why do you need that? It's like you not want to push your potential, especially if it's in a way that's actually conducive to optimal health. And there are, yeah, everything can have risks and side effects and pros and cons, but if you're doing it in a responsible way, it is overall a net positive for your health. What's
absolutely.
what's the argument there, right?
Yeah,
So it's like reaching that natural potential and hitting this. It's like you're hitting a superhuman level, which is like no one's even hit checking one box, let alone the two. So I feel like that's the ultimate motivation right there. Like it's so exciting to me, like what potential you can reach there and how much of a specimen you can become in that
exactly.
regard.
Yeah, I love that. Like going back to the car analogy, um, if you're kind of focusing on the base, like the fundamentals and getting your body to like natural potential, I think that's kind of like taking the 1972 Honda Accord and turning it into a Porsche.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're doing kind of like all the peptides or things like that, it's like you're taking a cold air intake and putting it into, or like a turbocharger in a 1972 Honda Accord. It's like,
Spending a ton of
what are
money
you
tuning
doing?
up a Honda Civic with a spoiler.
Don't
And,
do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly the case. Metaphor I like to use with people is like if you're just focused on the fancy stuff, the flashy stuff, like, you haven't addressed your foundations, your diet is terrible, but you're on like, oh, I'm interested in this peptide or this or that, whatever it might be. It's like you're shopping for a nice suede couch for your new house, but it's built on an awful foundation and the whole house is going to collapse. So there's no point in investing in the couch when the house is not even going to be there, right?
Exactly. You can go so far with like dialing in your diet and then kind of filling any nutrient gaps. I mean, just doing that is hard enough.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about I think Blueprint a little bit earlier, and if you look at Blueprint, it's amazing. But even that is still going to have some gaps. Like it's missing C15. I don't think that it has like a bioavailable calcium source as an example. So it can be pretty hard to do that, to find the right diet where you're really filling all those gaps. And some of them can be kind of counterintuitive. Some nutrients are hard to find in sufficient quantities. Like a great example of this is like K2. Like most people probably aren't getting enough, or omega-3s. That's another one. Like most people probably aren't getting nearly enough.
A lot of people you hear supplementing with vitamin D are not even taking K2 and they don't even
Yeah.
know. They're just railing.
Yeah, like
D3.
10,000 IUs of vitamin D
Yeah.
every day, no K2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or even just like the different kinds. Are they getting MK4? What's the half-life on that? I think it's like a few hours or something like that. So, and then calcium comes into play.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you really have to be kind of thoughtful. There's so much runway for improving diet.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like it's really just kind of identifying those nutrient gaps and then filling them.
Trying to cover your bases.
Yeah, and that's gonna be so personalized, based on your genetics, based on what you like to eat. That's gonna be really personalized. So, it really is kind of like going back to your house analogy. You got to kind of hire an architect and design that thing.
Got to make it earthquake proof.
Make it earthquake proof.
Make it look nice on the inside.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's not that fun.
No.
Like doing that's not fun.
Foundations are way more boring than shopping for the couch. And
Yeah.
what color do you want to paint the wall? And
Nobody really wants to talk about plumbing or electric or whatever.
Yeah.
They want to see the granite countertops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that is going to be the stuff that really moves that needle in a very big way. And then you layer in those interventions on top of it, and you're going to be unstoppable.
Yeah. That's why, I tell people, and that's why it's so cool to have you, because you're kind of, in my opinion, showing exactly that balance of hitting both those marks. And it's such a rare thing that it's hard for people to see what's not there. So for them to have a representation of it, it actually makes it reality. And that actually made me think of what I wanted to mention earlier, which is for example, for yourself, I think it's a skill that certain people have. I don't know where it comes from, skill, natural tendency, what it is. But it's to be able to see the potential of something that's far off from what is. So for example, yourself, before you had your overall health transformation, and you're I want to feel better, look better, be healthier, and you saw the potential of what could be and you took that action, right? Versus people are kind of stuck in what is, and they don't see the potential. So that's why I kind of came up with this thing, because I'm man, someone who's super off the mark still, all they have to do is work. I mean, again, it's not easy. I don't want to make it sound like it's easy. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Investing energy,
it's a part-time
time, money.
job.
Yeah.
I mean,
but it's if you just do these things, people can be drastically different. You could take someone who's obese, lose the weight, and you can look at them. It's almost like a customization, like a video game. And you're if they just did this, 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 and this, they could be this absolute specimen. But people are kind of stuck in their own reality and just where they are. So
yeah, I think it can be difficult for people to envision something being different.
What could be.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would have difficulty, as an example, imagining the walls in a room a different color. A lot of times people can't visualize that. But I think that's why it's good to set an example. It's why I started actually posting my progress pictures online, which I did not want to do actually at all when I first started doing it. But my coach at the time, this guy named John, he's such a great guy, so funny too. But he was like really encouraging me to post like before and afters, and I would do it, and then I would get all these DMs from people like, "Hey, how did you do that? How can I do that?" Or sometimes like weeks later, I would get these text messages from people I hadn't talked to forever about like an Instagram story. They're like, "I've lost 40 pounds. Thank you so much for the inspiration." Wow. So I think it's really powerful for people to see like actual examples, whether that be before and after, or just posting like different workouts. Because I think once they see it, then they start connecting things.
And just having it documented, like, this is what's possible.
Yeah.
And it might not necessarily inspire them to want to do that, but it just breaks those mental barriers of like what people have. So what I was going to say is like, oh, people think, oh, after 30, it's all downhill. You get a beer belly and a bad back. And it's like, it's not the age, it's the accumulation of the bad habits. You've had bad habits for 15 years. Now it's taking its toll and it's showing its effects. And people think like, oh, you're dialed in. It's only a young man's thing. Like, you're going to give up later on. It's kind of this like defeatist mindset.
That's so sad.
Yeah. It's almost like people, like, for example, they don't look forward to their birthday because it's just a reminder of like, oh, another year's gone by, and it feels negative. Versus if you're doing the right things, that's another year, more time that's gone by of you doing the right things and of you progressing.
Exactly.
So it's like aging, but that doesn't mean things are getting worse. It could be them getting better.
Yeah, you have a long runway for making things better. I think it far surpasses what most people think. And then I also think that it far surpasses, even when you see examples, I think we can go past that.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like the kind of biohacker that's, going to claim that they're going to live to 180. I don't think that's possible.
Yeah.
But in terms of like actual function, we can do things for a lot longer than we think that we can.
Yeah.
I was really lucky. I have this friend named PJ, and I'm going to give you a picture of him so you can put it up on the screen in this podcast. But I've known him for about almost 20 years. He's 10 years older than me. And I remember always being around him thinking, like, I hope I look as good as he does when I'm 10 years older. And it was so cool to just have this person who is like aging so well. He's in such great shape. And we work out together from time to time. And the guy is just absolutely shredded. He's 58 right now. And his like function is insane. When he was in his 40s, he became the top 30 tower runner in the world, which is like one of the most intense sports there is. You like literally, go up a high rise for speed, for time. So I don't think that there aren't too many sports that are that intense where you're basically redlined for 10 minutes straight. But he got to top 30 in the world in that. But at 58, he does not look 58 and just shredded, super happy, on 0 medications. So, I just think about like PJ, what's he going to look like in 10 years when he's 68?
Yeah.
And I know it's not going to be like a normal 68-year-old. I think that he will, just looking at how much function he's lost from 48 to 58 is 0. And when he was 48, that was when he was like top 30 in the world in tower running. Wow. And he's actually stronger now. So he has a lot more muscle volume. He just continues getting better. So he's still improving at 58 in his athletic ability on like a really high base. So yeah, I think most people, what they think of when they're getting older is, it's unfortunate because I think they're really selling themselves short.
Yeah.
And I also think that we were so attuned. I saw this thing on X the other day. It's like, if you're over 30, like tell me what's hurting in your body right now.
Just normalizing it.
Yeah, it's like, why is that so normalized? And as funny as that is, there's no reason that you should have to live that way
Yeah.
if you don't want to. And I think it's mobility is a really big thing. And then I think strength training, I mean, there's no substitute for that as you get older. But I also think that that's when not only your diet is important, but also like nutrient timing is like, that's when it gets like really important. So one example of this is collagen. And as you get older, our joints just get less and less circulation, and so it's really hard to rebuild soft tissue. And you combine that with a sedentary lifestyle, and then probably one where someone's not getting enough glycine. If that's happening, then their homocysteine is probably high, their glutathione is probably low, and homocysteine actually breaks down collagen. So they have like decreased collagen synthesis. They have no circulation in their joints, or not as much as they need because they're sedentary, and then they're not eating right, and then that's further like destroying their soft tissue. And so that's why people will just do like the smallest thing and get injured. But if they can address that, get enough of the right amino acids, glycine, proline, hydroxyproline, vitamin C, and do it at the right time, which I saw this one study, I'll send it to you, but it was looking at collagen synthesis in middle-aged men. And what they found was if they gave people collagen like an hour before exercise, collagen synthesis rates went up. So the highest was with 30 grams, and they administered it with vitamin C. But what was really interesting about this is resistance training. So normally resistance training on its own in younger individuals will stimulate collagen synthesis. But what they found is like due to anabolic resistance, as you get older, and in these middle-aged men, and these were guys who were already trained. So they were not starting from scratch, but just resistance training alone wasn't stimulating collagen synthesis anymore. So they added 30 grams of collagen and they saw it go up. So there are different things that you need to do as you age like that to take care of your soft tissue. But it's solvable.
Yeah.
It's you can solve this stuff, and you don't have to be miserable. You just have to move around.
Yeah.
Train.
I've even seen cases of people who, for example, they've trained calisthenics for like 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. And they're really just focused on their basics and foundations. Like they might try to eat pretty healthy. They might not even be doing a great job of it, but they just try to eat healthy the best they can, or what they think is healthy, and exercise. And again, they're not hitting the marks perfectly.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they've been consistent with like the exercise piece, kind of having that down, they're a specimen as it is.
Yep.
So when I see that again, it's like that light bulb, like they look that good externally, just having that piece down. Imagine if they had the natural piece down and then the more enhanced piece down.
Exactly.
The whole thing. So it's like, that just goes to show the potential too. It's like, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be close to perfect. You could just be doing a little bit in the right area, and you get that external result, which is interesting because, again, it speaks to being well-rounded, because people see the external result, which is why I think having the aesthetic and functional fitness is important, because people really just judge with their eyes.
Yeah.
And when they see the result, it's like, oh, okay, now I believe you. And it's like, okay, you look good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like a lot of people in the health space, they don't have the whole circle. So like a practitioners, they know strength training is good, but maybe they don't have the results of it. They don't practice it with enough consistency because they, obviously they can be pressed for time. But it's like when you check all the boxes, like imagine how much your practitioner's words, how much weight they carry when they're jacked. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Like all science and intellect aside, like we're all human at the end of the day. Some things are just spoken without being said,
yeah,
right? So it's like,
absolutely. Yeah, I think it probably is. You're saying perfection, and you don't have to be perfect. I think, you know, fundamentally, we're going to be in one of two feedback loops pretty much always, whether you care to admit it or not. You're either in a positive feedback loop where you're getting better, or you're in a negative feedback loop where you're getting worse.
yeah,
There really isn't homeostasis. It's kind of one or the other.
that's true.
As much as I wish there were homeostasis, there's just not. And so I think the trick is to kickstart that loop. And in order to kickstart the loop, it's really hard to do that. It's hard to really kickstart the loop if you're worried about perfection. Because if you're worried about being perfect, then you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I've got to figure out like what's the perfect diet. I've got to get all of this stuff together. Oh my gosh, now I've got to get all the perfect exercise program. I need to go watch 300 YouTube videos.
Yeah,
Where more likely what you just need to do is pick the simplest thing.
go for a walk.
Go for a walk. And it's amazing because you do that. If you can pick something simple, and let's just say, hey, every day after breakfast, I'm going to go for a 15-minute walk. Because, people, I think they don't understand how powerful walking is. And if you take a 15-minute, I'm sure you know this, but if you take a 15-minute walk after a meal, it's actually more effective at managing blood glucose than metformin. So it's like way more powerful than like a diabetes drug if you just go take a 15-minute walk. So if you do something small and kind of consistent, I think what ends up happening is you feel so good about it. And you feel good about yourself for completing something and making a small change. And it's crazy how the smallest change can kickstart a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
So I think that if people can just start smaller, take a walk, you will be surprised at like what that can turn into.
Yeah.
Because pretty soon you're gonna be like, oh, I took a walk after breakfast. I think I'm gonna do one after lunch.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do one after dinner now. And pretty soon, you went from 0 to walking 45 minutes every day,
Yeah.
and you're starting to lose weight. You're feeling better. Walking is so good for your mind, and that's gonna inspire you to make another change, and then another change, and you accumulate those over 2 years. And it's crazy what you can do.
Yeah.
And my transformation actually started before that before picture. That before picture was actually my after picture after losing like 26 pounds.
Wow.
And I was looking at it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so skinny fat. But before that, I should post what that picture looks like.
That would make
I
it
was
even
like 26 pounds heavier than that.
You have that before picture?
I do, yeah.
You should update it with that one.
I should.
The whole spectrum.
Yeah. But that entire thing started because I was suffering from horrible depression from this mold injury. And I was in an awful, awful state. And I remember one day just sitting there like, I cannot live like this. And I'm going to stop what I'm doing, and I'm going to make a list of like what are these lifestyle things that I could do. And during the pandemic, I kind of I got into a negative feedback loop, and I was working so much on different projects and kind of forgot to exercise and things like that. And so I started making this list, and the first thing on there was like, okay, well, I've got to start exercising again. And so I remember I went on a walk right after that, and I lived by this like running trail, and I saw these people running. I'm like, that's what I need to do. It doesn't require a gym membership. I think I'm going to do that. But there's one problem, and it's like, I absolutely hate running. So I went home and I got on ChatGPT, and I remember putting this prompt in, like asking it how it could make me addicted to running. And then I remember it like threw off this warning message, like, oh, addiction is no joke. We we shouldn't be trying to get you addicted to anything. And I was like, no, this is a positive habit. And it was like, okay, here's how you do it. But the funny thing is it started with me putting my running shoes by the door. That was like the first thing that I was going to do that one day. And the second day, it was like put running in your calendar. And the third day, I went on like a 5-minute walk or run. I remember thinking two things, like, oh my gosh, I'm out of shape. And then the second thing was, but I'm so glad I did that. I cannot wait to do it again. It was like just a 5-minute run. And then that compounded into kind of like where I am today. Kind of crazy. Like a lot can happen in a couple years.
It's just stacking those small wins, building
Yeah.
that momentum, and then keeping that consistency.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I'd lost 26 pounds. And I went to actually PJ's birthday party. And I ran into my friend John. And John is this, if you meet him, like nobody's going to forget him because he's just such a bright personality and he's so funny and so kind. But I hadn't seen him for a little while and he'd had a couple beers and I remember he came running up to me and I think he was like barefoot in a bar, if I recall correctly. Incredible athlete. He's like an Ironman and I think he went to the Spartan World Championships, but yeah, he was like barefoot in this bar, and he ran up to me and he was like, "Hey, Greg, do you want to get ripped?" And I was like, "Actually, yeah." It's funny you mentioned that. That was like next on my list. Let's do it. And so PJ and I decided to enter this like first form like body transformation competition, and so we started doing that, and I remember getting a call from John like a week into it, and he was like chewing me out. He's like, "Why aren't you like tracking your food? Why aren't you like doing this?" And I'm like, "I didn't even know I was supposed to be doing that." So just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I'll do like exactly what you tell me to do. And so I remember we set like my calories, we went over like my macros, kind of got all those dialed. Built out a plan for the exercise and like had a really amazing transformation. Those first 3 months, wow, just lost so much fat, gained so much muscle. And then doing this with John and PJ, like we would work out together every Sunday. We started this like text message chat, like group chat on just iMessage. We're still using that to this day. We message each other like every day. But it's just amazing. One, I think how fast you can make changes. But if you can find a couple people who are like going on the mission with you, that can make all the difference.
Yeah. So much more fun and so much easier and less resistance.
So much easier. Right? Yeah, if you're just on the mission with somebody else, it can be just incredible.
Yeah. So I actually wanted to go back to the mold thing because
I
didn't want people to think it's like, oh, it was just all smooth sailing and it was just this upward thing. You did have some challenges and some obstacles. So maybe we could speak more about that. Like first, what was the first challenge? Was it the mold? And then like, how did you find out about it and how did you navigate it?
Well, at this point in time, I'd lost touch with Sam a little bit because he'd moved to Florida and was no longer practicing here. So I had found this other practitioner. I didn't really connect with them like as well as I did with Sam. But he like just texted me and said, "Hey, wanted to check in. How are you doing?" And I just kind of missed talking to you. Do you want to like chat? So we got on the phone and I think talked for like a couple hours. And I was telling him that I was like feeling really depressed. And it's like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Well, we should do some blood work on you." And so we started working together again. And I think that it was probably about 4 months into that. He's like, "You know what? I think we need to test you for mold." And he's like, "Let's just see if we can rule that out." And the reason why he decided to do that is he had mold infection himself. And so he'd experienced that. So at first we thought it was like Seattle winter and like maybe a seasonal affective disorder because he'd also experienced that too. But you can't really test for that. So we like tried a couple interventions for that, and then during the summertime it was still happening, and so he's like, "Yeah, let's test you for mold," and sure enough, came back and had a pretty nasty infection.
You remember what test you did?
Gosh, it was I can't remember off the top of my head. It was a urine test.
Your mycotox.
Yeah, yeah. It was I'll have to go look. But yeah, it identified a few strains of mold that I'd been exposed to during a project I was working on during the pandemic.
So not at your home.
Not at my home.
Okay.
No.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a good one to find out. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, thank
At
goodness.
least it's not.
Yeah. So it wasn't in my living space. But it was pretty serious. And so he also had the foresight to test me for Epstein-Barr virus. And that came back positive as well. And so, what was happening is, mold can reactivate Epstein-Barr virus, and it literally feels like you have mono. You just have no energy, and you just feel horrible. So we found these two things out, and I was kind of like in the mid process of my transformation at the time when I found both of these things out. A lot of all other blood work luckily was like looking pretty good, but yeah. So we started a protocol. It was like intraconazole. So it took some of that. Some NAC, trying to boost endogenous antioxidant systems, and then just the intraconazole and binders.
Good.
Took about 6 or 7 months of that before it was like cleared.
Okay.
But wow, I did not realize like how awful mold can be. That can mess you up so badly.
That was the first obstacle.
Yeah, I think like that and Epstein-Barr virus, like having those two together, it was awful.
Yeah.
Because when that is reactivated, you just have no energy. Your energy is just kind of in the toilet.
Yeah. That was was that before your transformation? 'Cause
It was like I found that out probably September of last year. So it was like kind of after the first round of the transformation.
So even in the midst of that, you were still able to get those good results.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was so all in, and I think that once I started seeing, I remember like 11 days in, I was seeing abs. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is so cool. But I was also taking these really long walks during the summer because I was trying to walk, like 15 to 17,000 steps per day. And it was beautiful out. It was amazing weather in Seattle. And I remember like walking by people's homes, and I would like look in and see them watching TV. And it had this like really profound effect on me. Because for a while there I was thinking, gosh, I'm so glad, like, why aren't they outside? This is so amazing. I'm so glad that I'm out here walking because it's so beautiful and that I'm not inside. And I remember at that point in time, it was this firm mental shift. Like, I feel like my identity changed at that point in time, where it's like, I want to be very different from other people. I want to like really make this something that I do the rest of my life.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask, like, how did the transformation change your mindset?
For the first time in my life, like really wanting to be in a completely different lane than most people.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think a lot of times I'd feel like an outsider. And so I think one mental shift was like really feeling comfortable in that lane and feeling like this is the only lane I really want to be in the rest of my life. And then I think obviously like tons of positive mental benefits. It's incredible the amount of how good you can feel when you're working out consistently. And I think there's like also this deep satisfaction of progress, as slow as it may be. But if you can see your progress over over the months, whether that be through like body measurements or before and after, or even seeing the results on like a body spec or BIA analysis or whatever. You can see that you're getting muscle. Wow, that just feels so good. And I remember setting all of these milestones, and it would feel so good when you like achieve those.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so I think those are probably the biggest benefits. It's just like feeling really comfortable making this a lifestyle and being different from everyone else. I think kind of having this vision of, that's another thing that just became so clear to me, was really having a completely different vision of how I could age, and realizing that I could probably be ripped in my older age if I kept things up, or I could be like substantially stronger. And that was just so motivating to me. And I think that's when I kind of started dividing, putting more structure around the project and kind of dividing it into more distinct phases. And that just felt so like empowering, of just having these milestones that you're going after.
Yeah. It seems like one of the biggest themes and probably needle movers in your health journey has been kind of you taking charge and becoming the CEO of your own health.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
As much as you've had help from people working with practitioners, all this stuff, a lot of it comes down to making that decision, and you're really delegating and managing your health like you're the CEO of the company.
Yeah, right? I love thinking of it that way.
Yeah.
Like, you are the CEO of your own body. It's actually something that you can't really outsource.
Yeah.
Because as good as any practitioner is going to be, they're not living inside you.
Yeah.
Day to day. They're not going to notice these things. And also, like, you're the one who has to put in the work and do the work. And you have to make the decisions, because if you decide wrong, you're going to be the one who lives with those. So it really is like a CEO role, because that's exactly, the same thing that a CEO does.
Yeah.
But you got to have a trusted, it doesn't mean you're doing everything yourself.
Yeah.
It's, you got to hire the right executive team to really take the company, or your body in this case, where it needs to go.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like, when you think about what's most people and the average person doing, it's like they're running a company with no CEO.
Yeah.
There's just a missing CEO, and there's just like, okay, it's all confusion and disorganization, and things are kind of mayhem. And it's like, okay, well, can't be surprised that you're not going to get the result you want or a good outcome with no leadership and no direction and no structure.
Exactly. You have to have leadership and have a vision of where you're going to go. Like, what is that? And what does 10 years look like? What does 20 years look like? Do you want to spend the last 20 years of your life fighting off multiple diseases and on 10 medications and dying slowly? Or do you want to not have that and be on minimal medications, hopefully? Maybe just fighting one disease if you're lucky. So yeah, I think it's having that vision, and then really, how are you going to get there? What are the things that you're going to need to do in order to achieve that vision? And most people aren't going to be able to do that themselves. I would say even really good practitioners, everybody's going to have gaps they need to fill. Yeah. It doesn't matter. I mean, you could spend your lifetime studying stuff and you're still going to have gaps. So I think it's really important, who is that executive team that you're going to hire?
Yeah.
And bring in, and you tell them the vision, and you tell them the milestones, and once they kind of understand that, they have so much context to be like, okay, I get it. Here's what we're going to do.
Yeah. And I feel like, again, the first step is hire yourself as a CEO. You have to take the responsibility.
Yeah, take that responsibility.
Be in charge. Otherwise, the executive team's not going to be able to do what they're supposed to do. And in your story, it seems like that turning point was when you made that decision of I want to do this, and you're taking that responsibility, charge, and really kind of going forward on your own with or without the help, and you're going and seeking that help as well.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's, kind of when I started bringing in more coaches like John and PJ. And there's still, like critical parts to this. Or like hiring a hypertrophy coach. That was a great one. I did that decision in May. Wow. I, that was one of the best decisions I'd made. But yeah, just finding the right people to bring in. Is, you can watch a few YouTube videos or read a book on hypertrophy, or you can hire somebody who knows way more than you will. They'll forget more in the next month than you ever learn, and they can just guide you through it.
Yeah.
So it's just such a great way to accelerate your progress.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of give some actionable maybe advice, like what do you feel like has been the biggest needle movers in the macro and implementations you made, maybe diet, lifestyle, and then maybe we can get onto like the supplements and the fancier stuff.
Yeah, I think probably at first it's probably really the boring stuff, like logging my food, getting in the habit of like logging my food, weighing myself every day. Those things are not fun. They really are not fun. But what is fun is having that data and understanding like what caloric target is going to make you gain weight or lose weight. So I think those are probably like the fundamentals. And from there, kind of getting your diet dialed. And you can start by dialing. I think the simplest way to start is just like, figure out your protein. How much protein are you going to get? And like protein and calories, like you do those two things and start tracking stuff. And that's like a great place to start.
Clean up the simple stuff, get rid of the junk.
Yeah.
Eat the best quality you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think even just by logging,
Yeah.
like
You become aware of
you
it.
start becoming a lot more aware of like what you're putting in your body and how many calories you are getting. And then, if you start looking at something like Chronometer, like after a month or two of doing this, you're going to see that, oh, I'm not hitting my targets. Oh, why is that? Like, what food do I need to fill this target? So I think that just by logging and observing, it will have like a lot of downstream impact on that.
Yeah. It's interesting because usually when people ask like advice on something like what they should do, usually they already have the information for the next step or getting started on that next step, but they're asking about like 2 steps, 3 steps ahead,
Yeah.
and they're not even acting on the next step for them.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah,
oh,
exactly.
like, what's the best diet? And it's like, well, you're eating junk, so you don't need to worry about what's optimal.
Yeah.
Just do what you think is healthy, even if it's not perfect. It's going to be a step in the right direction. Then you can, slowly refine things. People think it's like they're just going to snap their fingers and go.
Yeah, geez, it's not like that at all. I mean, I'm still tuning my diet every day.
Yeah.
I feel like, but gosh, if you can just track calories and protein, that's going to get you probably like 80% of the way there. Because you're going to start understanding, that maybe I am eating a little bit too much processed food or junk.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to sub this out with that. It just becomes apparent.
Obviously, you kind of refer to yourself as like a biohacker, right? That's a big part of your health experiments. So what are some of the, I guess, your favorite biohacks, and what have been some of the most, needle moving ones for you?
Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like when I first got into this, I feel like I was so into kind of the more weird stuff. I think the older I get, the more I realize how much you can move the needle just focusing on the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. So I feel like anymore, I'm really trying to tune my diet. I'm trying to make that a lot better. So I spend a lot of time there, and then with nutrients, missing nutrients, finding those, actually making food that is going to work with my lifestyle and sustainable. I spend a lot of time doing that too. Yeah. And so I probably spent the bulk of my time on nutrition actually. Just figuring out like how to get all the right nutrients. So I think that and training is probably where I spend most of my time. And I think those are the two needle movers, as boring as they are, especially with training. Training can take you so much further than anything else. I think I posted this the other day because Andrew Huberman and like Brian Johnson were getting in this war about their supplements. So, Huberman was showing this new vending machine for AG1 that they put in like the San Francisco airport.
Oh, wow.
And, Brian, I think, responded to that and say, don't waste your money on AG1.
Get Blueprint.
Yeah, do Blueprint instead. And so I posted something. It wasn't meant to be, a knock on either of them because I respect them both deeply. But it's more showing, what supplements can do relative to like exercise. And it's like there's no comparison. I was showing like relative risk reduction. And if you have diabetes and you treat that, it's like a 20% reduction. And then I think that if you strength or like weak or strong, there's like a 200% difference in that. And for VO2 max, a difference between like the bottom and the top 2%, it's like a 450% increase. So, exercise is like the intervention to end all interventions. And there is so much that you can do to tune it and constantly make that better. So I think that's number one for me. Nutrition, number two, sleep. Sleep's really important. So that might be number one. If you're not recovering, you can't really do either of those other two very well. But I think those are probably the core three, just focusing on the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And then, so that's kind of like the foundation. And I would say the decorations in the house, if you will, are filling nutrient gaps, because you can go really deep there. And then applying any specific interventions. So, right now I'm trying to address, I have genetically high LPA. So I'm trying to address that. That's a big thing that I'm working on. And then the other thing is collagen synthesis. So I'm doing a protocol of BPC 157, copper peptide, and then kind of this pre-workout stack that I designed.
Yeah, I know. We talked about it on Exhibit where you shared your pre-workout stack, which is probably like 0.01% like of what pre-workout stacks are, even for biohackers. But again, it goes to show the well-roundedness and all the elements from like the Apex supplements to injectable L-Carnitine to maybe it was a more traditional pre-workout or something like that. But you have the full range of full spectrum, I guess.
Yeah, everything has a place in there. So like the injectable L-Carnitine, I take that really before workouts. That can make a really big difference in like just how your mitochondrial function, your fatty acid oxidation improves. There's actually some evidence to suggest it might upregulate androgen sensitivity. So it can work pretty well with like TRT. And then, everything else in the stack is really, it has a place to improve performance during the workout. And then actually I have an inter-workout drink that I drink too while I'm working out, which is kind of funny because it's just like Gatorade and like some branched chain, dextrin, and some L-glutamine and creatine and taurine. And then recently I added in biotin and molybdenum because I think that that may be a bottleneck to muscle protein synthesis. It's just not getting enough biotin. We don't know this for sure because there are gaps in the literature, but theoretically, biotin could limit that. The day after Thanksgiving, I trained really hard on Thanksgiving, and then the day after, and then I had like a camp out in the living room with my daughter, and I didn't sleep as well as I should have. And so I was thinking about like taking off the next day. But around noon, I decided, I'm gonna go for it. But I made this like custom tailored, pre-workout, and instead of caffeine, because I didn't want to drink 3 cups of coffee at noon. I used yohimbe because it's like a stimulant, but it wears off a lot faster. And so I added that. It's like 10 milligrams of methylene blue, and then a few other things. And that was amazing because I went from like wanting to take a day off to having this exceptional workout. And so, yeah, I think so much of it's just like trying to improve my workout performance.
Yeah.
Because, even if it allows you to get another rep in, then
Over a long time.
it's worth it.
Consistency. Yeah.
Yeah, because those final reps are the ones that really count.
Yeah.
When you're really training right on the edge of failure, that's when you're going to recruit all of your muscle fiber. And those are really going to be the ones that stimulate growth. And as you get older, it gets really tricky because you need more stimulus to generate the same response. So oddly enough, you kind of have to train harder when you're older, which kind of flies in the face of what a lot of people think. They think that you kind of have to go easy on yourself, but I think in a lot of ways the opposite is true. But then on the other side, you don't recover as well as you did when you were young, so you have to really find that line and ride it as well as you can.
Yeah.
And you're going to find yourself on one side of the line most of the times. Either like you pushed it a little bit too hard and having trouble recovering, or you didn't push it hard enough and you're not growing.
Yeah. What was the impetus for example, starting something like the L-Carnitine or the peptides, or I guess we can get to TRT after, but like, yeah, for example, for those two, because a lot of people's going to be like, oh, like, you don't need that. Like, why are you doing all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I heard a lot of things, a lot of great things about L-Carnitine. And so I started kind of researching it on my own. And I asked my coach about it. And he was like, oh, yeah, it's my hypertrophy coach. And so he was a really big fan of it. And then I asked Sam and my doctor. And I think he'd like ordered it before I finished the sentence. He was like, yeah, you should absolutely do that. That'll be great. So that's kind of how I started that. And I started TRT around the same time. And what I'd found is that my testosterone levels would be actually really great during the Seattle summers, with the long days and everything like that. They'd be like 850. But once it would turn to winter, they'd be kind of in the low 300s or 400s. And so this year, I'm just experimenting, been experimenting with going on TRT. It's been incredible. I feel probably better than I've felt in a long time. It's made a really big difference in just kind of how I feel and energy that I have. But I think next year I might try just making it a seasonal intervention or doing like HCG only during the summer. And so I think that's probably what I'm going to try next. But the L-Carnitine actually is very synergistic with TRT. They work together really well.
What would you tell someone who's interested in TRT for maybe whatever reason it is? Maybe they have not done a deep dive on their health, they haven't covered their bases, or they haven't done extensive lab work like yourself and come to that conclusion from a informed place. What would you say to that person, whether they're a bit younger or a bit older?
It can be such a personal and complex question.
Because it does get promoted a lot now. It's just like, oh, like, man, just jump on TRT. And it's like, there's good and bad to it, which the nuance is getting lost.
Yeah, the nuance is highly, highly lost. Because there are downsides too, which I'm sure you're certainly aware, but fertility can go down. You can actually lose, over time, you can lose the ability to generate testosterone at sufficient levels endogenously. So those levels can shut down. If you're thinking about having kids, that's a really big concern because you want to keep your fertility as optimal as it can be, and TRT can impact that. So then there are the side effects that you must manage and be aware of when you get on TRT, because it's not like you just do the dose forever. There can be dangers that you need to watch out for. like excess hematocrit as an example. So you don't want to run into those. So I think it's really good to work with a provider that knows this stuff, and is going to be very mindful for how they approach it. And that could start with, for some people, the answer might just be like, hey, look, your symptoms are so bad. Your testosterone levels are in the tank. Let's just get them up to a reasonable level and you'll feel better. And that's going to enable you to do all of these other things. It might not be the right answer for everyone. If you have testosterone in the 500s and you have zero symptoms, I mean, should you go on TRT? Probably not. Or maybe. That's going to be a very personal decision. So it is, I think that if you have a provider that's kind of pushing it without asking a lot of those deeper questions, it may be a sign that you want to seek out another provider.
Yeah. So like tread carefully for sure, and make sure you're doing your due diligence,
Yes.
doing your lab work, and
Yeah.
not just jumping to it too quickly.
Yeah. Because lifestyle interventions can take you a long way,
Yeah.
changing those as well. At the same time, people can get hung up on that. And I think it's so funny because, if somebody takes another hormone, like if they get on thyroid medication, like nobody's going to berate them on Twitter
Yeah.
for taking T4 or whatever. But suddenly, you talk about TRT or going on TRT on Twitter, and there are a lot of, I think, purists out there who think that, hey, if you are going on TRT, that means that there's something wrong with your body and you need to address that. And you can waste a lot of time there. I remember I tried for probably longer than I should have of trying to raise my testosterone naturally during the winter. And at some point, you just have to make a decision like, is this worth it? Or, are there more important things to do with life?
Yeah. It's kind of like when you're already dialed, you got your bases covered, you've done all, like we said, that kind of scale, you've done the natural stuff, you've got that optimized, you've been dialed on those consistent for a period of time. These things can start to be the cherry on top, or
Definitely.
kind of be those hard hitters in those tricky areas. So that's where the carnitine might come in, the peptides, TRT, and that varies person to person, case by case. And yeah, people really need to do their due diligence and not just take like, oh, I heard about Tonkat Ali, Huberman said it on Joe Rogan podcast, now I'm going to go slam Tonkat Ali.
Yeah, you got to be careful with those things.
TRT, I'm feeling a bit low, I'm going to just jump on TRT. That's, again, it all comes down to the nuance and the personalization, which, again, no one can speak on that for someone else unless you're doing the lab work, you're working with a one-on-one. It takes that level of attention and detail to have that information for yourself and come to a informed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She's
I love her. She's so
what she
great.
call herself, like protein forward medicine or muscle medicine,
Muscle
something
medicine.
like that.
Yeah.
I've seen something from her recently, which was, I don't want to misquote her, but she was saying something along the lines of like anabolics might be the future of medicine for older ages.
Yeah.
And that's something that I was like, cool, because for me I don't have that stigma and I'm thinking about it from the science perspective versus someone just hears that like, oh, anabolic steroids, bodybuilders are terrible for you, when it's like most people don't even realize that bodybuilders are even abusing those compounds.
Yeah, they're taking really high doses.
They have purposes and they've been used medicinally, and that's how bodybuilders started using them in the first place.
That's right.
So it's like we have to actually look at things for what they are and critically, and not just be swayed one way or another, because who knows, 10 years, 15 years down the line, people might be getting much better quality of life and being jacked and healthier because of something like
absolutely. Like muscle's so important as we age, and it can literally be life and death. Over 50, if you fall and break a hip, do you know what your prognosis is? Like,
I've heard it. I'm forgetting the
it's
number
like
right
50% of people who break their hip over 50 will die in 2 years.
now. Yeah, that's what it was.
That's wild.
2 years, yeah. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
So if somebody is in that risk category, like are the dangers of anabolics, which can largely, if you're doing it under the supervision of a medical professional, you can mitigate. But like, what's the bigger risk factor there?
Yeah.
Like not having muscle and falling, or some potential side effects from anabolics. I could definitely see that argument.
Yeah. So going back to the training, like how do you structure your training, especially training 6 days a week? Because recovery is probably going to be a big focus for you, right? And then like,
Yeah,
how are you breaking up your strength and hypertrophy sessions?
yeah. So I kind of, in a lot of ways, I kind of do like a hybrid, because I do, kind of like a lower rep count. I'm pushing everything to failure in a lower rep count. And really, I think it's training near failure is probably the more important part. Whether you do, 4 reps or 20, it probably isn't going to make too much of a difference. But I think there is a really big difference in training to failure in 15 to 20 reps. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure if you've done that. It's so painful. That can be really, really painful. Whereas for me, I feel like training in like the lower rep count for at least the ones that, you're really pushing it, 8 to 10 is probably good. If you're doing something like leg press or, bench, for kind of the accessories, I think, you can go a little higher. But as long as you're getting near failure, that's probably the most important part. And then from there, just figuring out where do you feel more comfortable. For some people, that's going to be going lighter and doing more reps. For other people, it's going to be going heavier and doing less.
Mm-hmm.
But just keep it simple. And then after that, it's just trying to get enough sets per week per muscle group. And so I try to train, depends on kind of like body part, but good rule of thumb is like 10 to 12 sets. You should be good.
How do you break apart your training sessions between body parts?
So I'll do, I basically break it up into back, chest and shoulders, legs, arms, and then accessory. So accessory would be, things like forearms or doing a little bit more shoulder work and things like that, hitting calves again. So yeah, that's how I break it up. And then I'll take a rest day, 1 day a week, but I'm kind of flexible on that. Just because, what I've found is if I make that rest day static, sometimes I feel like training that day. Other times I really feel like I need it. So that was like, I kind of like float that day, and I can almost always make it up. And then I don't feel guilty about it. It's just like I just get right back on the plan. If I feel like I need it, I take it. And then I think the other thing that I've noticed as well is it can be pretty beneficial to put some space in between, your really big days, which are going to be like back, chest, and legs. If you try to do those in consecutive days, it's a lot harder than if you space those out.
They're pretty taxing.
They're really taxing.
If you're actually pushing it.
Yeah. So, if you can do chest, followed by a rest day, followed by legs, followed by arms, accessory, like that's going to be a better way to break it out.
Yeah.
But it's just like so personal. You just have to experiment and see what feels good for you.
Yeah. And are you doing mostly weightlifting, mixing it in hybrid training, calisthenics? What's your kind of, what are some of your favorite? Are you doing bench, deadlift? Like, what's your kind of spread of exercises?
It is kind of like a bodybuilder style training. I've really grown to respect bodybuilders a lot because they have so much figured out, and I'm trying to basically hit a certain target of muscle mass because I'm sure you probably heard Gabrielle Lyons talk about this a little bit. Like muscle mass is going to be predictive of longevity. It's not just strength, it's mass. And so I've targeted 107 pounds of skeletal muscle mass, which is a lot on my frame, and I'm 5 pounds away from that.
Nice.
The way that I like to think about it is having a sarcopenia bank It's kind of like your body retirement plan.
The best insurance policy.
Yeah. So it's kind of like retirement money. Like it's better to have way more and not need it than the other way around.
Yeah.
Because one hospitalization, you could lose 20-25% of it.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you're looking at what is that drawdown, and can you lose 20 to 25% either through hospitalization, accident, or just through sarcopenia, and still be okay. So I set it at 107 because 25% off of that is 80 pounds of skeletal muscle mass. And I kind of know what I can do with that level of muscle. And I was thinking that'd be a great number because I could probably still like do something like climb Mount Kilimanjaro. My daughter wanted to do that at some point in time. So that's why I targeted 107. And when I hit that, I'll probably go more into maintenance mode and then start working on more aerobic and power. Because I have it in this mind, like once I hit 50, I think it'd be so cool to not only be in the best shape that I've been in my life, not be in really good shape for a 50-year-old, but I have this vision in my mind that I'd like to be in the shape of a professional athlete at their prime when I hit 50. And I think that's entirely possible. So with 100 pounds of skeletal muscle mass, VO2 max above 50, you can't push it too high just by virtue of the way it's calculated because it has weight as a denominator. So it's really going to penalize people who have a lot of muscle. But I'm looking at those two metrics and then VT1, ventilatory threshold 1, which is kind of the point at which your body starts changing up fuel mixture and switches more from fat oxidation to using more glucose and glycogen. So to me, the reason why that's important and possibly more important than VO2 max once you get above a certain level is that I think that's probably maybe a better measure of your mitochondrial health. If you can, going back to my friend PJ, when he was like in his tower running prime, this blows my mind when I think about it. His ventilatory threshold was 155 beats per minute. So he could get his heart beating. I mean, that's a serious number, and he wouldn't be out of breath. That is just wild. And he was my age when he did that. So I would like to get up I don't know if I can hit 155, but like being in the 130s, maybe 140 would be crazy. So yeah, I think if you can be there, which PJ was like one of the top tower runners, you kind of have your aerobic capacity totally dialed and power dialed, that combined with strength. And I think that's roughly representative of like a professional athlete in their prime.
Yeah, so we're definitely gonna have to do follow-up and check in on your progress.
Yeah.
Especially when you get closer, hit that goal and see,
I hope
see
so.
the difference. That's honestly the best way to do, right? Constantly have transformation. So even once you reach that, you're still pushing the boundaries, and in 2 years then you look back and you're like, oh, that was great, but now I'm even at a new level. I've had a transformation from my transformation and a result.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm hoping I can hit that muscle target hopefully by like next May would be great. So by my 49th birthday.
So are those kind of the main things you're working on and working towards right now, or is there anything else in terms of health optimization or anything cool that would be worth sharing that you're kind of
I think the muscle mass right now is kind of my main focus in terms of training. So I think that's a really big one. And unfortunately you've got to put on a little fat when you're building muscle too, so that's kind of like not the most fun thing to see the abs start disappearing, but it's a necessary part of the process. So that's kind of on the strength side. On the kind of like health optimization, I'm working on seeing if I can lower my LPA, because I've done that twice before, and I want to see how low I can get it, just because that is one of the most, probably one of the biggest risks that I have to mitigate, and there aren't really any known ways to lower it right now and lower that risk. So I'm trying to do that. And then I think probably two other things is the collagen. So this intervention with the copper peptide and BPC 157, and then my pre-workout collagen. So really trying to get my soft tissue into a good place. That has had amazing results, by the way. I'm like 3 weeks in, and I noticed this yesterday because when I did chest and shoulders day, I would always have like some shoulder pain, especially when I would go and do flies. I would get, basically down to here, and it would hurt. And I'm doing those completely pain-free now. That kind of was like pretty mind-blowing for me. And then I think the last thing that I'm working on is trying to get my C15 levels to a place where we know that ferroptosis doesn't happen. So I'm about to take that test. I think I've been working on that since July. So I think it probably about time.
Awesome. Well, Greg, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we'll keep up with the progress, and yeah, like we said, we'll do a follow up and keep things moving forward.
Sounds great. Yeah,
All right.
love it. Thank you.
Thanks.